Welcome to the MSP Corner podcast. Before we kick off our show, we would like to share what our main objective is at the MSP Corner. Our main goal is to help CEOs build profitable and self-sustainable IT service firms. We are not just providing tools for IT firms, we will be sitting in meetings with you to ensure your IT firm stays on track. The first area we are focused on, strategic sales. IT firms are stuck selling technology or IT support. We will provide you with the blueprint so you position your firm as an added value to your prospects. We will have framework on how to sell value so you influence the prospect into selecting your firm. The second area we see many IT firms struggle in is marketing. 90+% of businesses rely on antiquated marketing methods. The most popular choice, word of mouth. We have proven methods on how to attract the ideal prospect. Our framework will include how to become the online authority and be the business influencer for an industry. The third component to our package, scaling. IT firms walk away from opportunities because they lack the bandwidth or skill set to scale. We have lined up reputable businesses so our members can hire on-demand resources that will allow them to scale their business. The fourth area we will offer help in, selecting the right tools. In order to deliver value, you need the right tech stack. Our platform will offer information on products that are the ideal choice for MSPs. The fifth area we will offer help in is with documentation. Templates are a critical component when building an MSP. We will have contracts, proposals, SOWs, collateral, and much more in the template section. You will have every document you need to start up your managed IT service business. Thank you for tuning in. Let's go to our next podcast. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. I am your host, Fernando Leon, and I am joined by my co-host, Gregory Moravietz. And today we got a great show planned, but before we get into intros on our guest and their company, let's quickly go over the table of contents. We're going to do an intro on Matt Cox and Konstruct Digital. We'll do a deeper dive into this organization. We're going to talk about the value they have to offer IT firms, because I have some questions lined up here. What is performance marketing? He'll explain that to us. And the reason to engage performance marketing. The common challenges a lot of firms have. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss strategies that Matt is going to share with us. Common mistakes IT firms make. And how long does it take to see results? I added a few questions here, so I'm going to throw a couple of curveballs to Matt. And how would an IT firm decide on keywords? So let's kick this show off, and let me do a quick intro on Matt and his group here. So Matt has been in the marketing business for over a decade. He's been at Konstruct since November of 2012. So he has a lot of experience in this business. So, and Konstruct Digital, they are a Canadian-based firm, and they've been around for over 12, 13 years now. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you guys are primarily working with, you guys are working with every industry out there. Is that right?
Yeah, within the realm of kind of a B2B space,
Gotcha.
we only work with B2B organizations, but within that, I would say, like, to try and narrow that a little bit, we tend to work with B2B organizations that have a bit of a sales cycle to them. That tends to be our area of specialization. So how do we work with not just the marketing side, but having full line of sight on the sales side too, and make sure the two are talking to each other, and that kind of, you know, sales is existing in service of marketing rather than vice versa is kind of a bit of a pivot point we're trying to push with businesses. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is an established firm. They have over 30 people, and they're in what? You guys are in Calgary, Toronto, and Phoenix. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. All right. So you guys are a big player. So that's great. Well, hey, we want legitimate firms talking to our audience, and I appreciate you making time for us. So let's get into this and give us a little bit more about Construct Digital and how you guys work out there.
For sure. So, I mean, we live mainly in the realm of performance marketing. If you're not kind of living in the marketing vernacular on a day-to-day basis, really you can divide marketing firms up into two groups, kind of full service creative marketing agencies and performance marketing agencies. And they both kind of serve different purposes in terms of developing your, real full-fledged marketing offering. The kind of full service creative, I mean, they're much more focused on the creative side of the business. So, if you're looking at logo reimagining, right? Video content, anything that's really highly creative stuff. Certainly they'll delve into website redesign and this sort of stuff too. Performance marketing tends to be the tactics that you do to bring leads to the door. So we live in the world of pipeline, right? Everything we do needs to kind of tie back to increasing pipeline. So the work we do is much more akin to advertising. So it's, search engine optimization, search advertisement, display advertisement, LinkedIn advertisement, social media content, blog content. Email marketing, like these sort of tactics that are much more ongoing tactics, not like, hey, every 2 years we need to completely rebuild the website and get a fresh look. It's what's the ongoing marketing work that we're doing to drive leads to the door, to build our business, build our pipeline, grow the business, and ultimately just kind of grow our market share.
Now, so I'm going to focus on the value of your firm is because I mean that's what you guys do is we constantly are talking about becoming the online influencer, right? You have all these influencers that create content that is either entertaining, educational, or which is great. I mean, you have these influencers that have built huge corporations by just them. It's just a personality, but
Mhm.
I would think that the IT firms would take the same approach, obviously, but for their audience, right? Because you got to understand your audience. So, do you help IT firms determine, hey, this is the value you have to offer, let's say, the medical industry or the let's say legal industry, right? Do you guys help IT firms with that direction to determine, hey, you guys need to focus on creating this type of content? And let me just throw something out there. And let's say, hey, Matt, I want to create a video on a short form video for legal firms. Would you guys create the video, or do you want them to create it, or how would all that work? Because I everything you just said, I believe in SEO, PPC, right? Optimization of keywords, content creation. I love it. You are on point. But one of the biggest challenges, and Gregory, he has some input too here, because a lot of these guys have a hard time determining, well, which direction do I take? Why should I what do I need to say? What is my message? Do you guys provide that type of value for IT firms? Because let me tell you, we're the least creative group out there. Well, I can sell halos in heaven, and Gregory can walk on technology water. I mean, we're really good at that. But man, I've become creative. I shouldn't sell myself short here, but a lot of these guys, 99.999% of them, they don't have a creative bone in their body. So
Yeah.
share a little bit about that.
For sure. So I would say that we primarily work with MSPs that have found kind of product market fit from that positioning standpoint. If we're dealing with an MSP that doesn't have that, I mean, it's usually pretty obvious to us from the get go. Like, let's say they're just doing managed IT services for their local city, which is where a ton of MSPs start from. I mean, to me, that's not a position. That's just, hey, we're starting a business in this city, right? They haven't become a value added partner with anything. There's not, I mean, they're not like single POC where you guys have, figured out, okay, this is the niche that we want to target here, and we have kind of a broader market for this, right?
Yeah.
So we tend to work with MSPs that have already figured out, okay, what is that unique positioning that we have? And if we are approached by an agency that or an MSP that hasn't had that, that would be the first thing I would advocate to them is this is something you need to develop. In terms of services we can provide, I would say that we are not necessarily the absolute best experts in that positioning conversation. We can definitely provide a lot of research in terms of validating or even better invalidating a particular area. Like, for example, if you're like, okay, we want to be the MSP for law firms. We can look in and see, hey, this area is incredibly competitive. Not saying that it is, but just for purpose of example here,
Yep.
this area is incredibly competitive. If you guys are not willing to invest X and as a result spend Y into marketing budgets to tackle this area, it's out of reach for you. So let's not even go down that route here, which is tremendously valuable information to have because otherwise you can spend years before reaching that conclusion that, oh man, we are just outclassed here. But in terms of like sitting down and having like a boardroom level conversation where we really kind of walk you through and coach and all this stuff, there are companies out there, I think, from a positioning standpoint that do a better job of that. That tends to be more of a one-time project. But we really engage in as companies that have that MSP. But the way we'd like to phrase it is they've got a fire going and they need someone to throw gasoline on it. That's what we do is we come in and amplify that message. If you have that positioning and we feel that, okay, there's a path to success through this, that you're not tackling a market that is way too big, like you're not entering in a race that you can't compete in, that really, how do we take you with that MSP, with the credibility you have, with the skill set you have, and elevate you within that space and promote your visibility?
Yeah, what I see, okay, so a lot of these MSPs need a lot of guidance, just like you were saying.
Hmm.
So you work better with firms that already have that internal guidance and they've had their website's in great shape. They've done a good job with the design. It's just, let's say they're on Google's third organic page. Would you guys be able to come up with a strategy so they can climb that organic ladder and get them to that first page within 8 to 10 months? Is that asking too much of your firm?
No, that's exactly what we would do. Ideally, we wouldn't like to be pigeonholed into having SEO be the dedicated strategy ahead of time. We like to be able to go into engagement and perform our own analysis and come bring to the table like a GTM strategy or go to market strategy that we think is appropriate. And yeah, quite often that strategy starts with a combination of SEO and paid ads because these tend to be the lowest hanging fruits. They tend to be speaking to an already engaged prospective customer that has an acute enough problem that they're looking to pick up the phone and contact you. But certainly some instances we might look and say, okay, for your unique positioning, that you validate this positioning, you've got customers within this, but you feel like you're a best kept secret. We're not seeing a lot of specific search demand. There's zero volume keywords here. So people, you have a target audience, but they're not aware of what you do. And so in that instance, we might take what we call a demand generation approach to it, where it's like, okay, we're not going to spend a lot of time on SEO paid ads, paid search ads here because people aren't actively searching for this. Instead, we're going to really identify who is the firmographic we're talking to, figure out the total addressable market, and maybe take an approach like LinkedIn advertisement to really build awareness to that audience that, hey, this service does exist. So walking through that kind of analysis and figuring out the most effective go-to-market strategy that starts to fill the pipeline as fast as possible, so we build trust so that salespeople are moving, so there's activity happening, and then move into kind of the longer term initiatives. That tends to be the analysis that we would do at the front end of an engagement to really figure out what strategy is going to be most effective for us.
Matt, music to my ears, brother. Music to my ears. Let me tell you why. Because I agree 1000%. If there's no search, there's no history of search or the metrics determine, oh, there's not a lot of searches made for that. I would absolutely pivot to the LinkedIn platform because
Hmm.
there you can start slowly building a brand. You can start getting your value proposition to a target audience, and you're absolutely right. That would be the next best approach because what other approach besides email? I mean, oh God, what are those common challenges? Because man, I tell you, it's radio ads are out, TV
Hmm.
ads are they're like I fast forward through ads now, right? We don't even have to watch commercials anymore. So what strategies do you feel are we're it's the 21st century now. So what would you recommend to small businesses that are a B2B organization and they want to get more business? Because man, I could only think of 3 or 4 funnels that I would want to implement. So I would love to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, and you're 100% right about that. Like that's the way it is. I mean, there's essentially 5 or 6 or 7 at a stretch tactics that are
Yep.
really effective here that
Yep.
aren't purely in the realm of like you know, um, you just kind of Hail Mary, like, let's just throw some experimental budget at something. Like proven effective tactics, yeah, there's not that much out there. But because of that, so much of the competition has consolidated on these tactics that it becomes harder and harder to execute these tactics effectively. Like looking at SEO, for example. I mean, SEO that we did 10 years ago versus now, it's 10 times the work for one-tenth the result because there's so much competition out there, and Google has become so effective in terms of understanding the content of a website and where to place it in the rankings. LinkedIn advertisement. So many people start a LinkedIn advertisement campaign with what we call a cold casting net, where they just say, "Hey, I'm going to target this kind of firmographics." LinkedIn makes it very easy if you set up this campaign yourself. You punch in, "I want to target these companies. I want them in the US. I'm looking for this budget range." It says, "Hey, we recommend a budget of this." You throw your money at it. You're like, "Hey, look at the engagement I'm getting these ads," and you get zero conversions from it. You start to see a lot of ad repetition, ad fatigue within the first couple of months, and eventually you're like, "Hey, I'm wasting money on this." So there isn't a lot of tactics, and the tactics that are there are much harder to get to work effectively than they used to be because of the absolute extreme level of competition that's out there. So this is where we certainly advocate is the value that we bring to working with organizations. Like, yes, you can set up a LinkedIn campaign on by yourself. Yes, it will fail. And yes, it will destroy your faith that marketing is even something that can generate results. We hear that message lots of times. Okay, I've worked with a previous agency in the past. I spent X. We didn't really see much from it, and now I'm looking to. But I have no other tactics to grow besides SEO, paid advertisement, email marketing, the ones that you listed here, right? So this is where that combination of having an agency that is very deeply specialized in these few tactics and deeply specialized within your industry is the only real way we find to be effective. And this is why we do what we do. We used to do a lot more things, and we just gradually every year we cut off a little bit more of our services because what's the old adage that an expert is somebody that's made every mistake you can make in a very small space. Like that's ultimately what this space requires now, right? It requires people that are highly specialized to be effective.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I mean, and some people are scared to fail. I'm like, I'm okay with failing, right? You got to try and figure things out. Like I use the
Mhm.
info today now. It's I think the new way of building business or to generate new business is by becoming that influencer, right? Somebody who says, "Oh, marketing doesn't work," is like somebody who's out of shape and overweight and says, "Well, the diet plans don't work and all that."
Yeah.
Well, that's because you're not consistent, you're not disciplined, you're not working out, you're eating like crap. I mean, you're not going to succeed if you don't follow a structured plan. And that's the same thing with marketing. If you think, just like you just said, oh, you can go create a LinkedIn ad and and give up on marketing because it didn't succeed. It's like, dude, that's not your area of expertise.
Mhm.
Rely on professionals that do this every day, that have done this thousands of times. And I think, you know what, we can jump to common mistakes IT firms make. And that's exactly what they do. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They like to do things on their own because they think, oh, this is easy. It looks easy. I saw an
Yeah.
ad. I can create that ad.
Yeah.
No, it takes so much more thought into going what that messaging needs to be and who that audience is. It's like you got to talk to your audience. You got to understand their biggest pain points, and that's something I think you guys can offer with these firms that are trying to get their message out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because I will say there is so I come from a developer background. Prior to this, I was a developer for um, about 15 years. So coming into marketing, I was very used to this kind of technical world where there was like very hard rights and very hard wrongs, where things were quite binary in terms of how we approach things. Marketing is much fuzzier. You don't always get a clear answer on things. You sometimes get an assortment of signals, and from these signals, you make an inference as to what a user's thinking or is not thinking. It's very hard. You can't just pick up the phone and call the 1,000 visitors you had today and say, "Hey, why did you decide not to contact me?" Right? So it is it is a fuzzy world, and yet a lot of people that come from an IT background, I think, I would say they almost naturally don't have that inclination or that kind of propensity towards the fuzziness. They tend to be stuck a little bit more in the very kind of binary thinking for things. But yet, because they have a technical background, they think they can do this stuff. So, like you say, like, hey, I can code HTML. Hey, I can use set up a LinkedIn advertisement. Hey, I can set up HubSpot and so forth. Right. So
Yep.
it almost sets them at a disadvantage that having that mindset. Right. I mean, you really have to. It's a hard switch to go into this with that kind of fuzzy understanding and say, hey, I just need to look for hints and to figure out why this isn't working. And I need to iterate. And a failure is not a waste of money. A failure told me what doesn't work. So I have narrowed down what could work here, right? And that is the mindset you need to have to be able to market effectively, especially within highly competitive spaces.
I agree. I agree. Greg, you've been pretty quiet. You've always had some good input for this area. What questions might you want to ask here?
Yeah, so I mean, if it is it okay to go down one road only and just concentrate on that, and try to get that to be successful? Because I noticed that if you start in your blogging and you start and you're making podcasts, if you start and you're making, LinkedIn, you're pushing on LinkedIn. If you're spreading yourself a little bit too thin, it's going to be like there's a lot of work and there's not a lot of return. So it's like, what do you do all this work and you get very, very, very little return.
Hmm.
It's like you're in an ocean and you're trying to bail out your little rowboat and there's more water pouring and you just can't get anywhere, right? You're just like, oh man. But
Yeah.
do you suggest you just go after one objective at a time?
And that is such a good point, right? Because that is a common mistake we see people doing, especially when they're trying to execute it themselves, is they spread themselves too thin, they're too diffuse, then they get frustrated as a result of not seeing the efficacy, in the end result, or return on investment towards the work that they're doing. And they form this opinion that, hey, this doesn't work for me. There's some unique characteristic about me and my business that marketing doesn't work for us, right? So I would absolutely recommend that you pick a lane, and say, hey, and this is where when I speak to this idea of a go-to-market strategy, all marketing works fundamentally. It just is there's a huge spectrum in terms of how effective it is. So really, is figuring out what is the first thing that we want to do here that's got the highest chance of generating results, so that you build a bit of that pipeline, you have leads coming in, and that buys you the bandwidth in order to invest in some of the things that don't work quite as effectively. And you might think, okay, why don't I just constantly do the thing that's working? Well, it's because there's a maximum return you can get from each tactic, right? Like if we think of SEO, for example, there's only a finite number of people searching for specific terminology. So, if you think IT services firm, just using a very generic example, there's only X number of people that are searching for that each month. If you rank number one for that, you are maxed out with that particular tactic. But if you're saying, hey, as a business, we still want to grow, then you start to look at less effective tactics for that. So I think really identifying what is that tactic that's got the highest likelihood to give me a positive ROI in the shortest period of time, put all my eggs in that basket right out of the gate here. I mean, if you got unlimited budget, sure, we can do unlimited things, right? But really focusing on one thing, getting that thing moving, then move on to the next thing, getting that thing moving, with the idea being that, hey, I'm building a marketing flywheel here, where maybe each one thing isn't the knock out of the park home run, but there's enough singles and doubles happening on a regular basis here that the flywheel itself is the knock out of the park home run.
How long does it take to see results for, let's take each funnel, let's say PPC. If you were to build a PPC campaign with display ads and have it really focused on specific keywords, right? And I know there's I think there's wide range terms. I forget what the terminology is with PPC, but what type of because you can start generating leads pretty quickly, but
Hmm.
define quickly, right? My quick is 2-3 months. Your quick might be 6-7 months. I don't know. What should IT firms expect on this type of investment? Should they get, what type of, how soon should they be seeing results?
Yeah, when you're talking about a search ads campaign, a pay-per-click search ads campaign, I mean, this is the quickest go-to-market strategy or tactic you have, right? Because it's pay to play. So, I mean, you know, um, when working with an agency, I would say when doing it by yourself, I mean, a month. When working with an agency, 2 to 3 months just to account for onboarding and everything else in order to build that relationship with the agency so they can market effectively on your behalf. And but with the caveat that your goals, and to use Google as an example, Google's goals are not aligned. I mean, your goal is to spend the littlest amount possible in order to get the highest amount of conversions. Google's goal is to get you to spend the most amount on advertising possible. And they do that through clicks. So you think that, okay, this means that we're lying. So I'm getting a click, that's great. But what Google will do is they might take, hey, I've got a very specific keyword I want for something. And they would take that and be like, okay, here's 10 keywords that we think are related to these keywords. But you might look at them and say, no, these keywords are nothing to do with what I'm doing, right? You might think that they're semantically related, but they're not. And so Google will spend more of your budget. And when you look at the actual searches that are driving you results, you'll be like, okay, these searches are not my target market. They don't fit my ICP here. I don't want to spend money on these searches. So the caveat I'm speaking to with looking for a timeline past 2 months is just that once the campaign launches, you'll immediately start to generate clicks, immediately start to generate traffic to your website. And ideally, you'll start to generate some conversions right off the bat. So people contacting you. But there's a process over a period of months, and that usually ends up being ongoing, of just constant management of this account of looking at the keywords that people are searching for and figuring out, okay, how do we exclude the stuff we don't want to be in here? Looking at the times people are searching for and figuring out, okay, how do I make sure, I don't want my budget being exhausted on Wednesday at 12 o'clock because I spent it all on Saturday night at, 2 o'clock in the morning. So making sure that all your budget's allocated at the right times. There's a lot of management aspect that comes with it. Like the way we like to look at a search ads account is it starts out as a big block of ice, and we want to turn it into an ice sculpture. So what we're doing month over month over month is constantly carving off pieces, with the idea being we're consistently improving the return on ad spend and decreasing cost per conversions until we get the final product. So to
Mm.
get results, 2 months, I think, to get to a very effective and efficient campaign. 6 months to a year is probably a better time frame for that. But at that point, we're getting results, and hopefully it's paying for itself. We have a positive ROI. People have faith in it. So we have that runway in which to actually continue to work on that.
Would you recommend they go SEO first or PPC first? I guess it all depends on goals, right?
It,
Yeah, I guess it would all depend on goals.
well, it actually, I would say it depends on competition. Because
Oh,
your SEO competition and PPC competition, yes, they do tend to trend together, but you might look into a space where so it's not wildly uncommon to look in a space and say this space is locked up. We have a term in kind of the SEO and performance marketing world, which is kind of like building a moat, right? And when we say building a moat, it's like, hey, I'm so far ahead of the competition that I built this moat around me, and they basically can't touch me. So we might look at some space and say, from an SEO perspective, all of your competition on the first page is kind of moated here, right? And
mhm.
and it's a zero sum game in the sense that for us to gain market share in SEO, your competition has to lose market share. So if your competition is so far ahead of you, it might be that the budget is not something that you can reasonably spend, does not make sense from a marketing perspective. Your cost per acquisition versus your long-term value ratio is going to be completely wildly off in order to tackle this. In that case, we might say, hey, paid ads is our only opportunity to get in here. And maybe our paid ads is just a sliver of the total market. Maybe we can only show it to 1%, but at least we're showing it to the right people here. Whereas SEO, our best case scenario is to get from position 70 to position 50, which means nobody would still see it, right? So a
Mhm.
lot of that, looking at the competition and figuring out how fast people are moving, influences which tactics we would recommend to go to first.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Hey, well, Matt, we're coming to the end here. I want to share your URL, but I'm hoping that you could provide a webinar in the future for our audience, because these guys, they need help, and if we could get them to if we get them more educational information on the value proposition you have to offer, I would be open to that if you are.
Yeah, yeah, would love to. That'd be great.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Greg, do you have any questions? Because we're going to wrap this up before I share Matt's URL here.
No, that was very informative. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Matt. All right, guys. Matt's URL is www.constructdigital. That's KONSTRUCT digital.com. And you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. I can get you in touch with Matt. But I appreciate everybody listening in and tuning in. And don't forget to sign up to be a member on the MSPcorner.com. Please share our link with the CEO, who will find our information beneficial to their business. Have a good day. Thanks again, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening. And don't forget to sign up to be a member on www.mspcorner.com. Please share our link with a CEO who will find our information beneficial to their business. Have an awesome day.